PC and make sure broadcast PC is on mute.
Yes, broadcast is on mute. So host is ready to go. I'm not sure why. Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. If we can just get an idea of anyone online, if you can hear us, if you could just put a thumb, oh, perfect, excellent, thank you so much. So I will now call the meeting of the Climate Change Advisory Committee to order. Members of the public and everybody in the room and everyone online is advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton, so they're available up on the website. And also that a reminder that electronic devices are to be switched to the quiet silent mode, just doing myself as well. And then members, you can use the raise hand function in WebEx to advise us when you wish to speak to an item. So just kind of raise your hand. If we're not noticing your hand being raised, we'll try and keep everything, like we got you up on the screen so we can see everybody kind of listed out. So we should be able to see it. But if there's not an issue, if we don't notice that your hand is raised, and it is, if you can unmute and just let us know, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so I'll do a roll call. Councillor Craig Cassar. Okay. Councillor Alex Wilson. Thank you. Councillor Cameron Croche. There he is. Hi.
Hello.
Jeff Hardy.
Present.
Ian Borzuk. Okay. Aditya Keaton.
Present.
Thank you. Bayod Akomolafe.
Present.
Thank you. Frank Lenarduzzi. Absent. Gabby Kullapush is here. Mary Ellen Scanlon. Online.
Present.
Thank you. Mary Luz Velasco.
Here.
Okay. Miles Sargent. I think he said that he was ill. Lucia Ayantuono. Shelley Rempel. Here. Thank you. Tran Nguyen.
Present.
Thank you. Matthew Tuddy.
Present.
Thank you. Jillian Henry. Absent, I think. Jesse Hudecki. Absent, I think. Juliana Casimiri. Absent. Oh, no, there she is. Sorry. Go ahead, Juliana. Thank you. Adan Amer.
Present.
Thank you. Jordan Boyer. Okay, I think absent. Jen Matthews. Okay, I think that's absent. Zach Kuzak. No. Sue Heenan.
Present.
Thank you. Eladia Smoke. And Tristan McLaurin. Oh,
Present.
perfect. Oh, thank you, thank you. That's Tristan, right?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. And then if the staff can just introduce themselves with their name and position, please.
Manager, Office of Climate Change Initiatives. I didn't say it loud enough.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll say it.
You within division?
Hi, Scott Turnbull, planner on the policy planning team.
And hi, my name is Catherine Winkleman, Senior Project Manager of the Office of Climate.
Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes purchase of 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island.
For the development incentive program for the Bayfront area, I think it makes sense in terms of we want to promote that, but for me, there's an optics and maybe a justice issue in the sense these are grants, and what we were giving to homeowners were loans. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if there was some forgivability of those loans, but I think people would say, okay, just devil's advocate here, folks have sat on their buildings for a lot of years, they bought them cheap, they might not have wanted to reinvest them for any number of reasons. They might be able to show hardship because they don't keep money in the company that owns the building. So it might be easy enough for them to say, yeah, we don't have the money to do this. Whereas homeowners, I just think optics-wise, it should be loans or forgivable loans. It shouldn't be grants, because if you look at what was provided to homeowners, it's not a level playing field in that regard. And I get that there's a real need to look at industrial emissions in Hamilton. I totally get that. I just think public funds, it just optically, it doesn't make sense. And in terms of the ambulance thing, what I would suggest potentially seeing is there room for bigger batteries in the ambulances instead of putting solar panels on the roof, which could be fine, but the ambulances could be, you know, idling out front of a hospital where you're not going to get much sun. It could be at night, again, not much, you know, no sun. So I just don't know if it's going to make sense, like if you're going to get enough bang for your buck, whereas potentially if there's room, you could just expand the battery packs in the ambulances, and that might be more cost effective. Thanks.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, thanks for and we'll certainly share that back with the ECDEV folks who prepared that application, because I know they're working on developing other programs to encourage greening more climate resilient industrial and commercial buildings in the city. So we can share that back to them for sure. On the ambulance piece, if you're interested, we can share some more information, because the folks who, you know, from Hamilton Paramedics who put this project forward have already piloted technology. So it's a specific system that's designed to be put on the roof. So in their application, they actually shared some data, and they've got an ambulance out there already using this system.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So we can do that for you if you're interested in those details.
And just before I hand it over to Sue, can I hand you the chair just so I can add myself? Thanks. I was wondering about, in terms of the kind of applications coming in, so you wait for applications to come in, now you're moving into a bit more strategic, reaching out to different departments to try and kind of work with them to support applications coming in, is that correct?
Yeah, not necessarily. So what we did in 2024 was just a blanket distribution. We made sure people were aware that the intake was open. And we prepared, you know, we had an application template that was distributed to people. I think, you know, when I talk about reflecting more on being more strategic, probably what we would want to do is adjust the application template to address, you know, strategic directions, and so that people when they apply would know, okay, this is what we're looking for in what you submit to us.
And then is the thinking to kind of, like, a lot of granting programs are bringing in equity considerations and implications and opportunities into their proposal template, and then allocating scores to that to try and give that a boost. Is that something that you're thinking of doing?
Absolutely. So the template that exists now, there is reference to climate justice. But again, we did this in 2024, right, when we're just getting ourselves up. So we ensured that staff were making themselves aware of what is climate justice. Can you speak to in your application whether what you're proposing addresses this? We also ask people to really share any co-benefits, right? Because we know a lot of this work brings other co-benefits. So that was another piece. But I know moving forward, we'll also be looking at how do we effectively integrate what emerges out of that climate justice framework, and integrating that into the template that we're using for future applications. That's the plan for sure.
And it may be worth considering, like, reaching out to some of the kind of more social services, kind of not-for-profit housing, to kind of identify what kind of projects could they be providing. They might need a little bit more supports from the climate department to kind of identify those synergies that can achieve their priorities, which are probably not climate, they're probably other things, but there might be opportunities for those kind of synergies that they may not necessarily be able to kind of pull together on their own, that may need some help from the climate change department to help kind of build that brainstorming on potential projects.
Right. Are you thinking about players like City Housing?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you. They're
doing great. They're doing great.
Yeah, they're doing amazing things. And if anything, you know, even you can see, and I love this when I look at the pitch for funding that they made. It's a feasibility study they've identified, because we've had lots of conversations this year about extreme heat and how do we start to effectively deal with this. You know, there's a very clear commitment there, and they're linked in with all of these other social housing providers they want to share, right? They want to do a feasibility case study and share it out.
So it might be something along with taking the kind of approach that City Housing Hamilton has done and bringing that to other not-for-profit housing providers, because they may not have the sophistication that Hamilton Community Housing does. And it could be
Exactly.
some sort of training program, support program, energy concierge that they provide for that just kind of, but I think that kind of being a little bit more strategic in terms of reaching out to try and recruit the projects that you're kind of particularly really looking for might be worth trying to see what happens with that.
Yeah, thank you for that good suggestion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then Sue. Oh, and Alex. Oh, and Cameron.
So Gabby went ahead and said a bunch of the things that I wanted to say, especially about being, more strategic about, and providing that template, I guess, because I was disappointed to see that there wasn't more resilience in this, in the way that we already know that what we need. The climate justice lens piece is missing, that what we need to do, not hiring consultants and paying money for that, all that. The part about what Jeff had said, he was talking about the Macassa Lodge and yeah, making sure that the life-saving, things that are on for, it can still be on for everyone, that there's power for that, and that we're considering, the needs people, end of life, care, all of that. And yeah, so I'm just hopeful that, going ahead, that there can be more guidelines for, and the ambulance thing, I was worried about, I was thinking about how long the ambulances sit in, like, under the sheltered thing for, 14 hours as they have to wait for patients to be transferred. And I was just, so I'm glad that you'll share more details about that. But yeah, so I think just more guidelines, examples, things that are needed, like, what we need to see happening in the community would be, I think, really helpful.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, thank you for that. And one thing I was going to suggest, maybe as a future staff presentation, is we invite Indra Maharjan and his team from the Office of Energy Initiatives and the other city staff who are working on, retrofitting existing buildings. They're working with our team on developing a policy for new municipal facilities. I mean, that might be a really good opportunity for them to share with you, and I'd love to learn more, to be honest, how they're approaching this, and give them, an opportunity to explain a little bit about what they're doing now, and you an opportunity to let them know what more you think should be happening. I think that would be a valuable future presentation for this advisory committee for sure.
Great. Alex.
I just really want to thank folks who've been weighing in today, have sent emails as well. I think that's really helpful feedback, and just kind of want to maybe offer a couple of the summary pieces that I've been hearing kind of come up more. And then I'm not going to move anything. I'm a non-voting member, but I'll provide maybe some thoughts as to what the committee might want to decide to do about some of that. And it's some of the things that have already been talked about today, but just kind of formatting that in a bit more of a legislative step. So I heard, for starters, just the information presented. So not about the projects, not about anything that, but just getting a little bit more information was a theme. And me and Linda had a chat before the meeting about this one. It sounds like everyone would be a little bit more comfortable if there's more metrics and a little bit more focus on a justification. Specifically, if there's not a justification in terms of GHG emissions, there are sometimes ones with climate justice, for example. So just finding those links, making them more clear. I don't think anyone said we can't necessarily try and do that. So I just want to flag that I think that's been something that's been heard. I can take that back, and when we hear this at GIC, that's on my mind. I know Councillor Kretsch, Councillor Kassar have had the same thoughts as well, but that's just really heard that piece there, and I think that's something staff have also responded saying they hear. The other piece is, and it was brought up by Mary Ellen, do the terms of reference as they're currently presented serve this reserve and serve this committee now, given that this has been iterative, and every single time the community's had a little bit more control over this process every single year, does that work need to continue for next year? Someone mentioned maybe reviewing those terms of reference. That would be really good Q1 2025 work, potentially for a working group around climate governance that we have, and they could maybe take that on and provide some recommendations to if the policy guiding this reserve, there's any feedback. So I think that's work that maybe we want to do as a committee, or I've heard folks maybe want to do as a committee, can be added to work plans, but not in the context of maybe 2025's budget. And then the last piece is also just specific questions I have. So that's kind of what I've heard from folks. I have some similar questions on the metrics piece. If folks want to do a review of the policy, I think that's in scope and could ask to do that or could direct yourselves to do that work. I have some specific questions, though, I think about the two planning related ones and why they're being recommended to be funded from the reserve versus any other source. And I'm just picking on planning because they're a little easier. Like it could be said for any of these things. Why this, not their own department funding, is really the question. I think that needs to be maybe clarified for all of these things, but specifically, $50,000 for staff training for green building standards, green development standards. That was a planning initiated project conducted by the planning department, done by the planning department, directed by council. To me, that reads as the definition of an additional cost of an existing program, which is what this reserve is not supposed to fund. That's, so I'm curious what the justification is for that one. And the same thing with the Bay Area redevelopment. That seems like it's an erase grant or something else. Not saying it's not notable work, not saying it's not important work, but that's $300,000 that, again, I maybe don't understand, but my initial reading is maybe more appropriately funded from a different department. Other folks have priorities that maybe aren't kind of coming forward. If that could be moved to a different department, or if there could be clarification as to if it's appropriate, that might bring some of the flexibility folks are looking for. Those are, I think, my only comments, but Linda, if you have answers to that third bit, I'd really appreciate it. Through you, Chair.
Sure, through the chair. I can try on the two projects that you've pointed to specifically. So the $50,000, the way it's been pitched, it would zero in on the low impact development guidelines very specifically, and the intent there is staff training, but it would also include some external training. So there's a real interest in wanting to ensure on the implementation side that, because these are guidelines that apply to private sector development. So I think part of what's fueled that is we're shifting in new directions that are going to help us to build more climate resilience. How do we make sure coming out of the gate we're doing it right? So that's how that one was framed. And I know that there was an issue with, particularly on the training side and doing the training in that way. I know that there was some provincial funding that helped on the front end with some of that guideline development, but not enough left in that pot to do the training piece. So that was the justification that was given. It was, it's a bit of an innovative approach in the sense that it's not just about ensuring that staff all understand, but we're going to engage external players as well. It made me wonder whether there was an opportunity, for other staff with an interest in learning. Maybe there are people around this table who might want to be part of workshops moving forward. So a learning opportunity with a new piece was really what led to the support for that one.
Thank you. And it sounds, again, I'm just getting I have the terms of reference fresh in my head. And so one of the terms of reference says, yes, eligible projects are when provincial funding falls short. And then near the end, it says eligible projects are not when another city department started a project and didn't have enough money to do the project, or the project changed in scope. And that's not. And so I would just say, well, it's eligible under one hat, it seems like, and not under the other. And again, it's more so, how is that being interpreted? How will that be consistently interpreted every year from now? And maybe just something to think about during, if there is a review or if we're thinking about this policy, because we didn't have all these tools before. And so it's making references to some policies and plans that didn't exist, but now do. So thank you.
Yeah.
And Cameron?
Yeah, thanks so much. I wanted to really follow up briefly on what you were speaking to, Gabby, about the issue with respect to housing providers. And so I know right now, if you look at this, we see all these different city departments that are part of the fund, and that's where things have been allocated. And we think of City Housing Hamilton as a part of the city. Truthfully, as a board member, it's an arm's length organization that certainly it's a city organization, but it's arm's length. And that's great that we're supporting them. Also, though, I think as part of that matrix, we have to understand that the city actually has obligations that make every housing provider that they offer rent subsidies through, or rent geared to income subsidies through, and other kinds of subsidies and programming through, right, really a partner with the city as well. So I think it's worth having a conversation with the Housing Secretariat and the Housing Services Division to see if we can expand this, to Gabby's point, because I think right now we look at it and think, is Kiwanis really eligible for this, or is Ontario Aboriginal Housing really eligible for this? And I think the question is, we have to maybe think about how they may be, or maybe not be. And if they're not, I think we just have to think that through, because there's really quite a number of providers out there who might be able to benefit from some of this stuff, and they probably have much less of a capacity to apply for things like this. And so just want to think that through and think about what's possible, because we do have a deep relationship with those organizations, and we do have actually a legislative requirement as a service manager to work with them, just like we do City Housing Hamilton. So just wanted to offer that up there, so you could maybe connect with those folks and see about the possibility to expand this to other housing providers who the city has a service manager relationship with.
Through the chair, good point, Councillor. And I mean, at a minimum, I think we can make sure, work with City Housing Hamilton to ensure that what they learn, for instance, through their feasibility study gets out to those players. But I hear what you're saying, just in terms of access to the reserve itself. And maybe on that note, it's also worth speaking to the fact that really at this point, aside from, and we've had a few instances, actually, Councillor Wilson is in the room, where councillor motions have led to funding being provided essentially externally. So we have a natural areas inventory that's happening in partnership through the city, the Hamilton Conservation Authority, Hamilton Naturalist Club, with $200,000 worth of funding from the reserve from 2023 to support it, as one example. And as staff, we're really looking at what are the possibilities around taking a portion, because if you look at the policy for the reserve, it already enables us to provide funding to community partners. So what's the potential there for some sort of a community grants program? And one of the ideas that we've been just in a very preliminary way starting to talk about is the potential for small neighborhood grants to leverage action, at that neighborhood level, so that when you look at pieces like the adaptation plan that talks about neighborhood networks of caring, well, how do we as the city where's our leverage to start to support community and its ability to pursue pieces like that? So, we'll definitely keep talking to all of you about that piece, but that's another, when you think about the reserve, that's another potential pathway forward that could play a really important part here too.
There did seem to be kind of like a direction in terms of reviewing the terms of reference. I'm just curious, like, which working group would that review of the terms of reference fall under? What do people think about which working group that would be most applicable to? Is it the technical and governance? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would say maybe there is some kind of work that needs to kind of, maybe as an action item, taking from this, like going with the technical and governance, reviewing it, and the climate justice working groups to see what kind of input comes in for those terms of reference. Mm-hmm. Okay.
If I can just ask a question about the process this year, not to, apportion any direct questions, but we're hearing about this now when it's like a fully baked plan. Is there a reason that this didn't come forward when you were receiving submissions for this? And one of the reasons I ask is that the Technical and Governance Working Group actually already has in its terms of reference looking at reviews not only of OCCI initiatives on at least an annual basis, but also things like reviewing the terms of reference. That is very clearly outlined in the terms of reference that we put together. And I think we kind of anticipated that we were going to be getting this earlier in the process as opposed to a fully finalized list, so that feedback like the stuff that we've given today would be a little bit more impactful. So just trying to understand how things played out this year and how it'll be different in future years.
Yeah, through the chair. So we have an application template in a process that was ultimately approved, endorsed by the senior leadership team. So that's the process that we're following. And it does require, before we could come to you, there was a process where, the review and vetting happened through the Climate Change Initiative Steering Committee and ultimately their endorsement, and then on to senior leadership team before the list came through to you. So we can certainly go away and explore the possibility of something different for 2025, but that's, you know, we had an internal process that we were required to follow in getting through this round of applications.
So then is there any opportunity for this committee under a structure like that to provide input that would change the funding in any given year? Or is it just feedback that you would take back for next year every year?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Yeah, I think, I would say for sure, and, you know, happy to take that question back too around the process, and we definitely can commit to doing that. I would say for sure, I think there's a way you can influence by giving us feedback on, you know, what that template needs to look like, what the criteria are. So right at that sort of ground level, when we're asking city staff to submit applications, what are the parameters? What's the framework within which we want those projects to fit? So I feel like that's a really important one that could profoundly change the way this list looks in a future year.
Well, and the other way that this could profoundly change is if there's an avenue for community brought forward projects in addition to corporate only projects, which seems to be the current framing, right? Like if this group were able to suggest for next year, hey, look at this initiative and bring that to the table to weigh with these things with this new terms of reference, like that would be a game changer in terms of ideas that would come forward from the community that would probably have a bigger like person improvement of life impact compared to a lot of the corporate initiatives. And so making sure there's a mechanism for that is sort of top of mind for me, and it sounds like, you know, we'll have a role to play potentially in these terms of reference, which sounds great. But, you know, at the same time, of course, the city initiatives are going to be biased towards things that, as Councillor Wilson has highlighted, are kind of funding things that other departments are looking at, and they're not really going to benefit the public in a tangible way. And so the role of this committee is always going to be in tension with that, and you know, we're going to be advocating for community-focused climate justice-based solutions, and how do we make sure that that happens for next year is, it sounds like we'll get some feedback in the coming months on what that terms of reference is going to be.
All right, I've got Cameron and Sue, and then I'm going to have to cut the agenda topic out. Sorry. Cameron, take it away.
That was an old hand.
Oh, that was an old hand? Okay.
It was an
All
old
right, Sue.
hand. Sorry about that.
No problem. Sue.
Not to keep rehashing this, I'm really holding back because I'm really upset. You know, I know that you know what it is that we need to be doing, and I really hoped that that would have been guiding, you know, with these plans coming forward when people were putting them forward, and that it would have more teeth, like it would, like you would know what it is that the community needs, and I'm talking like, you know, residential care facilities and you know, like already knowing the populations of people that need the most help and kind of helping to guide funding, I guess, you know, opportunities for that. I'm just really disappointed. And I would really like an opportunity to, you know, to be able to help with this. And I really hope that the climate justice group can be involved in this, because so many populations were left out of this. And I'm thinking about ambulances, solar things, and consultants, and I'm mad.
Jeff?
Yeah, I guess what I would say on this, and I know that, you know, we've got a few members of council on this committee. There's nothing wrong with the list per se, but what I think the list misses is demonstrating sort of the value of climate change initiatives to the city of Hamilton, like to people in Hamilton. And so putting this out, I don't know if this is putting our best foot forward in terms of, okay, these are monies, your taxpayer dollars, putting my resident hat on. I just don't know, depending on how much level of detail is going to be provided to people, if they're going to see, okay, this makes sense to me as a good use of my tax dollars or not. And I would really almost consider going back to the drawing board to some extent, saying, okay, it's not done yet, but looking at, okay, I guess if the intent is to fund more inward-facing initiatives, or some of the initiatives are more inward-facing, maybe this is the wrong vehicle, because this is part of what you're going to be reporting on as an office. And then in your report to the community will look and potentially say, oh, I don't know if I'm getting value. Like, I don't see the value here because this is more inherently corporate. And I would just say that the focus, there'd be more bang for the buck in terms of just promoting the whole mission and promoting the office if it was more community focused, if that's possible, or just looking at it, because I'm not seeing it here in some of the things, because there's some really sort of front and center challenges that the community's facing right now in terms of that intersect with climate. And I just don't know if this speaks to many of them in terms of like encampments, in terms of opioids, in terms of like all of these sort of nitty gritty issues that people are really seized with now. I don't know, it's a big ask maybe to tie it in, but it's like, could the community centers or could the pools serve more purposes? Could they be warming centers? Could they be more resilient in terms of the heat staying on when power's off? Like, just maybe looking at it, it's more of a blue sky thing, but I'm just wondering how this could address the needs that you see in the paper or that are coming from residents, and I'm just not seeing it with this list, sorry.
Through the chair, I don't want people to feel disappointed about what's happening here. And I think one thing that I do feel like I need to share is that I don't think, I mean, this is $2.5 million every year, right? So I don't want you to lose sight of all of the other things that are happening across the corporation. I think there's a lot more happening that's contributing to taking us in the direction that we need to go in. I'm not going to disagree with you that we do need to be more strategic moving forward as we all figure out internally, right, how best to do this and to evaluate projects. I can tell you that our team is very interested for 2025. In fact, we're going to make it part of our goal to ensure that a component of the reserve is directed to that community level supporting that action. And that's something that is already officially in our work plan to do. So I guess I'm going to say, because I hear you, and I understand the urgency and I share, that worry that we're not moving fast enough on everything that we need to move on. But I think with this one, I'm going to say, we all agree with what you're saying, and we're working really hard to make this process better. Yeah, so I don't know what else I can add at this point, other than to also say, please understand, and I know with some of the concerns that you've raised, gosh, we had, I think it's actually in our annual update in the glossy appendix, where we've listed all of the different committees that we're also sitting on. So I want you all to know that we're trying to get our tentacles out there across all kinds of activities at the city and doing our best to push to make sure that, for money and resources initiatives other than what we have direct control over, all of these things are being considered in the way that you're describing. So I feel like I need to say that so that you all know that, and please all have faith in us that we're working hard to do that, sitting where we're sitting within the municipality.
Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the oh, sorry, Alex, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Apologies, Gabby, because I know we want to get to the bit of the agenda, but I do just want to say, before moving or seconding, again, I'm a non-voting member, so I'm going to be a little cheeky here. If there was a motion relating to referring this or referring items to a committee, that could happen at the end of this meeting, could also happen now while we're on this item before we receive it. We're also, the activity happening here is just receiving this information. We can change the activity if you would like as a committee. You're welcome to provide feedback as a committee, potentially. Again, it's hard to do that synchronously, and the timelines to get to November 20th are a little tight. It would require picking someone to maybe draft something and email vote to make sure it's representative, some of the things that happened in the past, like if there's people willing to do that work. I also something I've heard from staff that I just want to echo is that I don't think there's distance, and I think there's that distance that's been acknowledged, but I don't think there's disagreement, and that's the piece that I just want to stress. And as a result of that, if you're recommending that the city take actions to move faster, if council, when they're considering these recommendations on the 20th, look at something else, like all of those things, just saying, I think folks have said, it's a real shame we can't do anything today. And I'm not saying I know what to do today, but just to say, this report is coming on the 20th, much like just happened with green building standards. This committee could delegate, this committee could write reports. I don't know if there's outcomes being there. I just want to really make sure folks feel like they're not being told to wait a year on this one. Like if there is feedback, if there is a desire to keep going and see what's possible to do in the next, until the 20th, just want to say there are procedural avenues for that. And the other piece, no, I might just stop there. I think there are procedural avenues for that. Would really recommend maybe this committee looking at the terms. And then if there are any summary comments, again, the summary comments I've heard are right step forward, too focused internally on the corporation. And I think the biggest thing I've heard in the context of this year is, let alone the outside future year, is there's a reputational risk to the further this work because of the corporate focus, because folks aren't seeing themselves there. And so if this group has specific recommendations on how that could be maybe resolved or moved forward or improved, whether it's for this year or not, I do think it might be useful to bring that to council. So I'll just pause there.
I'll ask that question directly as a voting member. So in terms of scope of things like, for example, if there were specific projects, 2 or 3 that we think the funding should not go to those projects and instead be reallocated to different projects, what does your position within that bigger senior leadership team look like to bring that back? And would that be actionable? Like, I just kind of want to get a real assessment. Like, is there a possibility to change things for this year? Our group is already under the gun under a number of initiatives, like getting things back on green building standards has the technical and buildings working group pretty busy. I know climate justice is working on stuff, everybody's volunteer. So I want to make sure before we move anything to be ambitious about doing this work, is it going to go back to a climate leadership team that's going to go, okay, well, but we already made a plan for this year, try again next year. So I just kind of want to know, like, is there avenue to make changes and prevent some of these potential reputational risks in this year if we manage to pull together the people to do the work?
Through the chair, that's a good question at this point, because we're following the process that I described to you. So our next step is basically to take the staff recommendation report to the General Issues Committee. So I think this takes us back to some of what Councillor Wilson has suggested in terms of pathways that you could follow to express as a committee or as individuals your perspectives on what's been shared with you at this point. Yeah.
So one avenue that exists for us would be similar to the green building standards, to come up with our own citizens committee report to be presented at that GIC meeting saying, hey, here are the projects that we think are not so valuable and we would like to see that funding reallocated and staff directed to go back and reallocate that funding like this and see if council is amenable to that suggestion. Because it sounds like if we try to do something before then, like the report coming forward on the 20th is not going to change. So the only thing available to us is to say, here's our thoughts on that report and the changes we'd like to see, and then it's roughly in the hands of councillors to decide whether or not to take those recommendations. My understanding is that we are not going to have a meeting between now and November 20th. So is there an opportunity if say the Climate Justice Working Group were to put together a Citizens Committee report, is there an opportunity to circulate it via email and then, vote among voting members that way to have it presented? Or do we need to try to do something today to leave that option open? Because unlike with the green building standards, for that one I came in to the meeting with the Citizens Committee report ready. Today we don't have that work ready. So if we wanted to leave that door open, Councillor Critch, if you're still online, perhaps you could share, is there anything we could do that would leave the door open to that? Or does the Citizens Committee report also have the opportunity to be filled out sort of asynchronously and approved between meetings?
And I'm certainly not the legislative coordinator of this meeting, but I certainly can just jump in to say that, it would be very challenging to do so. You can't get things approved by email. That's just not how these things function. You'd need time to put something in front of you, at least from terms of a motion, in terms of a draft, those kinds of things. Today, in a really simple way, you could do something like by saying that someone from the XYZ group or someone here could go and delegate and share the concerns. And you could ask councillors in the interim to maybe put together a motion or an amendment, or you could ask for something to say, we want to make sure the next year's process is like X or like Y, right? Because I think that what Dr. Kasic is saying is that This is not going to change. The amount of work that's gone into this in terms of like finding new applications, these kinds of things. I mean, the only thing you'd be able to do this year is say, no, not these projects, right? Like that would be maybe a thing council could say, no, not these projects. And then the money would be put aside to fund other projects next year. Right? Like that seems like a thing. I just think trying to do this on the floor right now in this moment is probably going to be difficult to do. So I think if you want to set somebody up for the ability to delegate, you could probably do that. And then you can work offline about what that delegation looks like. Like you don't have to confirm the details of the delegation today in specific. You could do so broadly, if that makes sense. That's my best understanding of what's going on here. Councillor Wilson may have other ideas and said this is something that they suggested. So I'll leave it there.
Just to maybe, I'm trying not to be, I'll just give advice. I've been trying to just say options. My advice would be, because what you can do today is provide general concerns, is to provide those general concerns. That's what you've done today, would be to write our 3 big concerns are A, B, C, and a 1-sentence summary of each of those, because that's what we have today. I didn't want to take off the table or say, because it's not my scope, don't do more, but just if you're looking for me to maybe be a little less, everything's on the table, I think it's probably likely to be able to clarify in writing the comments that I think multiple people have said to agreement and see if there's a vote to say that this is the belief of the committee just in receiving this. And again, the comments mostly seem to be constructive, focused on doing better in future years, flagging the potential concerns with this year and how that might impact those future years' work. But no one's saying this is bad work. Everyone's just saying this is important work and therefore we need to be careful.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think leaving the door open to someone delegating seems like the clearest path to me, that we could leave something open that, and I would be happy to move something that says that our committee would approve someone to speak on behalf of the committee at that, without a formal report, but just to share some feelings. We may, as a group, decide that that is not the best course of action. We may decide that the reputational risks of having the projects that we think are not great go up and then us come out and say these are not great could be worse than otherwise. So I think we've got some internal discussing to do, but maybe just to make sure that that's open, that we say that we are going to allow someone to speak on our behalf.
Go ahead.
Through the chair, just one more piece, sorry, just to add, just in terms of process. So the staff recommendation report has not been finalized because we're before you tonight listening. So that's, I just want to say that's another route. I think if you vote tonight and you have specific feedback, we take that and incorporate that into the report that's then taken to GIC on November 20th. So apologies, I mean, that's just for saying that late in the stage here, but that's another pathway that could help too, you know, if the other options, given the tight timelines, aren't viable for you. Okay.
I think what it makes sense, like the climate justice group would be the logical, working group would be the logical place for the representative from the committee to do a deputation at that committee, general issues committee.
Yeah. I also have another thing I would be happy to move.
Okay.
So when we receive this report, I believe we can also put in writing some recommendations as we receive it. I think that's something that we can do in the minutes of this. And so perhaps we could particularly single out 2 projects of concern that facilitate funds flowing to corporations, which are the Bayfront Area Industrial one and the EcoDiesel project as being particular, problem projects, and that we could say that to staff so that they might remove it from the report in advance of the GIC meeting. And then in addition to that, say that someone from Climate Justice will be approved to go delegate on our behalf.
Okay. Then I've got remove from, sorry? Cameron, go ahead.
So you can't really, what you're going to delegate on has to mirror what you said today. Like the committee that you're here today has to have the right to be able to approve something, at least in a broad draft form. You don't have a citizen committee report in front of anyone to look at. So it's cool if you just say, we're going to authorize someone to delegate to represent the concerns that were shared today. And then as long as you don't say anything new, you're good to go. But you can't kind of go away as a working group, come up with a whole thesis and a whole bunch of information that wasn't shared here today, and then present that, because that wouldn't give this committee the opportunity to actually just say, yes, we're okay with that. So I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, right? It's great if you want to delegate people to do it, but it's going to kind of have to mirror what was said in public today. Hope that helps.
Are we able to ensure that the committee reviews the deputation from the Climate Justice Group to make sure that it reflects that? Is there no, there's no email kind of verification process that we can use for that? Okay.
So, yeah.
So only in the okay. Well, I mean, again, then it just limits the deputation to speak directly to what was shared at this meeting per se, with nothing additional, which is fine enough. We can live within that box.
If we get text on the screen, I have an idea for a motion that I think would cover this. Then we could work on it together.
Hi, everyone. Can we be mindful of time, please? It's also 8 p.m. and we do still have like 4 more things on our agenda that we have to get through. Like, I understand the importance of this, but I think we also should be respectful of everyone's time.
Agreed. Can you work on something while we're going on to other items? Is that possible? Excellent. Thank you. All right. So just on this one, can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation? Shelley, right? And first is Shelley. Any seconders? Can I get a seconder? Anyone? Along line? Anyone? Okay, thank you. All right. Okay. Okay, the next item is just staff updates.
Through the chair, maybe just a suggestion. Given the time, I don't know whether you want to rethink. I mean, there's information here we could share at the next meeting. I think the only time-sensitive piece is
the green
Trevor, the WWF.
Yeah. Oh, is that time sensitive? Okay.
Yeah, because
if you can do that one then.
October 31st is the deadline. Do you want to just cover that one, Trevor? And we can add this piece to the next agenda.
So did we actually have the slide for that?
Yep. So, this is a good news story. And sorry, just the first slide, or the slide above. So every year we report through what's called the Carbon Disclosure Project, or CDP. It's a global platform where we combine all of the climate action strategies, the actions that across the community and the corporation. And we won. We won what's called the One Planet City Challenge. We were shortlisted. It's a bit of a typo there. I would love to say we beat Vancouver this year. We didn't. They were just part of the alumni of previous years. And so we were scored from an international jury of experts. And it's really about the robustness, the completeness, and the commitments of Hamilton's climate action strategy. And I'll provide a brief disclaimer too, where the scoring doesn't necessarily include progress or, for example, how we're doing on greenhouse gas emissions, because as we have seen in the previous slides, or from an Ontario perspective, our greenhouse gas emissions are increasing. But I think we can all still be proud that we won this national award, and we would love, voting ends October 31st. You can vote every day. We are in a friendly competition with cities around the world. It's called the We Love Cities campaign, or We Love Cities campaign through World Wildlife Fund. And the next slide has the QR code and the website. You can vote. We've all been voting on a daily basis. Some of you may have seen we got picked up by the Hamilton Spectator, which was great to see. I think there was some other radios that picked up the story as well. And yeah, just overall, good news. And we actually just submitted a new report a few weeks ago, so we'll be kind of in the running / being scored again next year. But yeah, would love everyone's support and vote. There is also an option of what we can do better. So you can vote for Hamilton, but you can also share your feedback on what we can do in terms of climate action and sustainability. So I invite everyone to have their say through the We Love Cities campaign. Thanks.
Trevor, can you just send that around by email? I know that you sent something around, but if you can send that around to everybody by email so that they can have access, just for people who might have dropped off already?
For sure.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder on that item? Okay, perfect. Sue is the mover, seconder is Shelley. Okay, perfect. See, the Climate Change Advisory Committee Working Group updates. So they really just have the terms of reference for the Buildings Working Group and the Technical and Governance Working Group. The links for those terms of reference are in the agenda if you haven't yet seen them. But one of the goals of this meeting is that people have reviewed these terms of reference and that there's the ability for the committee to either vote on them and approve them or send them back with comments to the working group. Are there any questions relating to the Buildings Working Group terms of reference? No? Is the committee ready? So if we can go vote on these terms of reference for the Buildings Working Group, do we have still quorum? Do we have to wait for this? Like, what about if we don't have quorum?
Well, we do have to.
How many people do you have right now? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many people are still online? 10. How many we need for quorum?
12. Yeah. How many do you have online this week? So we have one.
I think we still have quorum.
You still have quorum? Great. So if I can call for a vote for the Buildings Working Group terms of reference. I guess I can, not allowed to. I can't, right? Okay.
I'm happy to move.
Okay. Lucia, move. And a seconder? It's okay. Sue for a seconder for the terms of reference. Perfect. All right. Now, if we can move on to the Technical and Governance Working Group terms of reference. Are you allowed to with the chair, like with the chair of the Technical and Governance Working Group? Yeah?
Not the chair
Okay.
of this meeting.
Okay. All right, so for the mover is Lucia, and a seconder is, thank you, Sue. All right, so we've got those approved. Green development standards. So I don't think we have anything, a mover or a seconder, because we didn't share. Maybe if I can ask you to give an update in terms of the green development standards input that is being compiled across the working groups, if that's okay.
Yeah, very succinctly, there's work being done by both the technical and governance and the buildings working groups. We're in coordination with each other. We've got meetings that are being scheduled for early November. We're also, members of our groups are listening into the conversations happening at BAC and trying to find as much overlap and collaboration as possible. So work is moving forward in both of these working groups. The final recommendations would probably be brought to this committee in December of that process, because we do need to get it in by January for planning staff. So at a December meeting would be the time that we would present to the wider group, although I don't think we actually need wider group authorization, because the motion at council was specifically directing the working groups to provide the feedback to planning staff. So it'd be more of a formality. If it doesn't happen, that's okay. We will circulate it to everybody. We don't necessarily need a formal vote.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Just a quick update on the city side for green building standards. I met with Mallory and Emily kind of separately on another meeting, but they definitely want to, and this is on me to do, is I'm going to connect the working groups chairs, you, yourself, and Matthew, and Buildings, Mary Lou's, as well as the co-chairs of the CCAC, and the planning staff want to invite you to City Hall. So I guess it's a matter of, I mean, it sounds like you have meetings in early November. I know they have on their timelines having to meet council planning committee direction to report in the first planning committee of 2025, right? So I think they're looking to ideally meet with you also in early November, mid-November, to get your feedback right from. So essentially you can do it two ways. You can provide your feedback to them in person, and then I would also suggest provide your feedback through through written correspondence as well.
And that's the early December timeframe, right?
Yeah, I would even suggest meeting with planning staff. Let's try to plan.
So
plan to meet
that
with
needs to
planning
take
staff.
place in November then?
Yeah, the meetings with planning staff would ideally
Gotcha.
take place in November.
Okay. All right. I don't think we need any mover or seconder for that kind of stuff, do we? No way? Okay, perfect. All right. So then I think we go back to the agenda item 9.2.
So we need to receive the information, and then this would be a separate motion that I'm happy to move. Oh, yeah. Sorry for the people online. We just need to vote to receive the information, and then this is what I drafted very quickly as a motion that would speak to what we discussed tonight and leave the door open for someone to go delegate.
Okay. And then can I ask for a mover and a seconder to receive this information, please?
I'm happy.
Okay.
Can I just provide some quick advice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just one little tweet.
Is the direction to provide, to delegate, be specific in, I would suggest, to provide written and verbal delegation. So that way you can have written go forward, and then you can also go in person as well.
Okay, so we should just say maybe
To-
written and or verbal
To
delegation.
delegate, to provide a written or verbal delegation before the General Issues Committee. Okay.
Just so clerks has that in writing.
Okay.
They'll say yes to it.
Are, Beatrice, are you able to make that change? Are you, like, is that up on here? Is that able to be made?
Let's see, what was it?
So a member of the Climate Justice Working Group to provide a written and/or verbal delegation.
And then you can change it.
And then
Yeah, and then now you can just make all the changes.
Yeah, okay, so let's go. Beatrice Over, climate change,
Climate Justice Working Group to provide written and or verbal delegation.
At the end, yeah, to provide,
to provide written and verbal
And or, let's,
and
but
or verbal delegation, okay?
yeah.
and if I can throw you the chair hat just for 1 second, if that's okay? Just in one question, if I'm trying to understand for this one. Now, the scope of this fund, this reserve fund, is for city initiatives. It's not a community granting initiative. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, under the current policy, it is open to both.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay, didn't realize that one. Okay, thank you.
And then once we get this approved, Beatrice can send that to Dan, I'm assuming, who's taking the meeting minutes.
Yeah, you just need to turn on your mic so that people online hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. And then once the committee approves this motion, Beatrice, as staff liaison, can send this to Dan for formal meeting minutes. As I say that, you may want to also provide direction on that the meeting minutes of today's CCAC meeting be sent to the General Issues Committee, or are you fine with just written?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you email, okay.
Okay,
So can I ask for a mover and a seconder to, Lucia, to move it? A seconder?
and then any objections?
Okay.
of course.
Sue, any objections? Hearing none? All right, approved. Okay. I think we have, so the only one we missed, I just wanted to kind of note, the only one we missed was the Hamilton Climate Action Strategy 2024 Annual Update. So if we can add that to next meeting's agenda, that would be great.
Yeah, and that was just more highlighting, that the report went forward, there were recommendations
Okay.
approved. But we can definitely add that. to
Can
the
we
November agenda.
get that staff report that went to shared with the committee so that they have access to it?
Absolutely. yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
that would be great. Okay, I think,
Yeah, it's on the agenda.
is it linked to the agenda? Perfect.
Somebody's raising. Frank is raising.
Frank, go ahead. Okay. I don't think we have any motions, right?
Frank needs to be unmuted.
I don't see it. Frank, do you want to raise your hand? Are you trying to speak? Then you need to unmute.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Go ahead with the motion and the
Okay.
plans.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We don't have any motions. Everything's good on that one. And I think I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn the meeting. Sue?
Hi,
Mover?
can I just ask for one thing? I don't know if this needs approval or what, but for future meetings, can we get estimated times added to the agenda
Oh,
for
that would
each
be
of the
great.
topics so that
Yes,
we
that would
can
be great.
stay on time?
Yeah, yes, please. Do we need to vote on that? No? No? Okay, perfect. All right. I just need a seconder. I have Sue as the mover. I just need a seconder for adjourning. Lucia, thank you. Lucia is the seconder. All right, I think the meeting is done. Thank you. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, have a good one.
All right.
You can turn off your mic.